All right. Well, welcome everyone to this December GreenStep Cities and Tribal Nations workshop. To all of our GreenStep City folks and other guests, we will be talking today, as you know, about construction, demolition, and building material reuse, which I think is a really exciting topic. And there's some really great examples we're going to hear from later about how some Minnesota communities are working in this area. And so for those of you who don't know, I'm Krista Morose. I'm one of the co-directors with the GreenStep Cities program. And I think we're going to kick things off this morning with some opportunity to do some random networking. I know I miss being in person at these workshops and having those moments to say hello to folks beforehand. And so we're trying to get creative to do that virtually now. So I'm going to pop you into some breakout rooms here with some random folks. And we have a prompt question for you all to talk about. And I'm going to put that link in the chat box for you here before you head into those rooms. And so this is a Google Doc. Or it's actually a Google Jamboard that hopefully you can access. And the question that we have on there is all about show and tell. And so we're wondering if you have an example at home that you have used, reused, repaired, repurposed some kind of material or product that you've created a project at home with. And so bonus points if you can take your laptop and show the group or add a photo. Otherwise, on that Google Jamboard, you can, on the left-hand side, if you haven't, I'll give you a little tour real quick. All right, so I see people joining in. That looks great. On the left-hand side here, you have options of adding an image. You can add these little sticky notes. You can add a text box. If you have an example, you can draw if you're really creative and you want to show us that way. Get creative. If you run out of room on this page, there's a little box at the top here. You can go to different slides as well. You don't need to say who you are unless you want to. We're just looking for some examples. If you need an eraser, someone might need one. There's also that on here too, but get creative. And I'm going to break you into rooms. If I can stop sharing. And we will automatically pull you out in about 10 or 15 minutes. And as we have people joining, you might have some more people hop in too. So let's go. It's loading. And do turn on your camera if you can, just to say hello and get some faces and recognition going.
Kristen, I clicked join room and it kicked me out.
Kicked you out. Let's see what I can do about that. Yeah, I've got a few of you left in here.
Or maybe we're just in this room.
Well, that works too.
I'll try and click it again. It didn't go completely out, but it didn't. I don't know. Hang on.
Oh, here I see. I need to, for some reason. Well, we can be in our own room here in the lobby. That'll work. I'll have to figure out why it's doing that. You might be able to also mess around with the little, when you hover over your photo, it looks like Beth was able to do something. But all right, so hey guys, does anyone have a good example of some project that you have in your own home?
Yeah, I have one. Unfortunately, I can't go out and show you, but we repurposed some pallets and like old fencing material when we bought our houses, just laying around with the property. So we built some compost area on the side of our house.
Oh, perfect. And who are you?
Oh, sorry, but Chris Watkins, City of Morris. I'm the sustainability coordinator out here.
Thanks, Chris. Love it. I think I saw. Did you put that in the Menti?
I did. I
question. Yeah.
Throw it on the Jamboard. I'm gonna try to draw it.
Yes, please. Who else? Anyone else want to introduce themselves and maybe have a project example?
I'm Shari Hansen, and we use a pitcher under our kitchen sink for our compost. So it's easy to grab. When I need to put stuff in it, I can grab it and then I can put it away. So
yes, got the handle built in. That's great.
Yeah. Anyway, then it goes in a big bucket in the garage, and I take it to the compost site once a week.
Perfect. Who else? I'll call on names. I'm not afraid of that. And now everyone's avoiding eye contact. All right, Story.
I'll go.
Okay.
My name's Natalie Hennigan. I'm the education manager at Rethos, which is a partner organization of GreenSteps. And I don't have anything like really that fancy, but I've used some lingering what would you call them, like pieces of a box spring, and built a shelf in my closet, and you can't see my closet. That's all. That was a project a couple weeks ago. So yeah.
Very
Love
cool.
it. How about you, Story?
Hi, I'm Story. I'm the Green Corps member with the City of Golden Valley, and I when I was living in my parents' house during the early stages of the pandemic, I went into my dad's closet and I stole all of his t-shirts that had holes in it that he should not be wearing anymore. And I cut them up and made them into paper towels. And now we do not use paper towels in my house anymore. We just use old Mark shirts.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Love it. Great example. How about Matt?
Yeah, Matt Roon, Northfield, and my computer is sitting on boards that sit on file cabinets, and I can't show you because I'd have to flip my computer in ways that would cause a disaster.
Definitely. I think, yeah, that was definitely one of our big examples going on. Chris, I love your compost bin picture over here. If you're not looking at the screen, you got to go find that.
I tried.
Oh. Hi, Mike. I see you just joined in. We're just doing introductions. We're in a little breakout room here. Well, we're actually in the lobby, but others are in breakout rooms. And we are just introducing ourselves and asking if you have an example of a reuse, repair, repurpose project at your own home. And we'll give you a minute to think, and then I'll let you unmute yourself and tell us. How about Clara? I know you just told me. Is it Clara? It's Clara, right? Clara. Dang it. I don't know why I bother asking how you pronounce names.
I do, I guess, like kind of a standard one of reusing a lot of like glass bottles and stuff, like for like cleaning spray and plant propagation. As you can tell, I'm kind of a fan. So yeah, holding
Great.
all the little knickknacks in my house.
And who are you?
Oh yes, I am a Green Corps member with Minnesota Green Corps with the city of Bloomington.
Thank you. Mike, do you have an idea? You're on mute. Mike, you're on mute. Top, I know, everything's different. Top right side.
Okay, should be working now.
Yep.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Hi, Mike Michaud. I'm a project manager with the City of St. Paul. I do a lot of work, renovations, remodels, planning for projects, whatnot for the city. And, you know, I guess I've been doing the kind of keep an eye on the recycling and demo trash making sure we've got proper specs in our documents when we put them out. And I think we've done a really good job on the projects we've done. One of my biggest ones right now is LED lighting retrofits through all the city buildings. And we've been trying to make sure the contractors are, properly dealing with the LED or the fluorescent tubes.
Mhm.
I think we've got TRC doing a lot of the recycling. And then we've got the sheet metal side of the fixtures. I've also been trying to make sure they're not just putting it in a dumpster and sending it to a landfill. But we're, it's been challenging, different contractors, different sites, different venues, but we're doing our best, to try to keep an eye on things.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you. How about Laura?
Hi all, my name is Laura Horner with the City of Bloomington and Solid Waste Project Manager here. My example is we built garden beds this past summer and used a bunch of old wood to build the bed. So it was much cheaper than going out and buying the kit at Home Depot.
Yes.
And fun.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for
Thank
this
you.
webinar. I'm looking forward to learning more.
Actually, that did give me an idea of one project I did here. Is I had built the garden beds at one point, and we didn't use the garden beds very much. So I took all those timbers and reused them to create a retaining wall for a fire pit area. So it's been one of those things. Those boards have been through 3 different projects. But
Oh, that's great. And Dave.
Sure. So I'm Dave Wanberg with the City of Faribault, and gosh, you guys have some really creative, wonderful ways to reuse things. So my challenge is usually I think I can reuse all these things, and I keep them, and I don't necessarily actually get around to reuse
Guilty.
them. Occasionally I'll save the old toothbrush and then go, oh, this is perfect for cleaning this or doing that and those kinds of things. But it's fun to listen to all the things that all of you have been doing. So thank you.
Same problem, Dave. Okay, I see some unknown users and guests. If you would like to introduce yourself.
Is that me?
I don't know. Whoever hasn't introduced themselves. I see some more people popping in too. So,
Well, I'm Allison Arlotta, and I work with the organization Build Reuse, which is the national profit advocacy. And so at the moment, I was looking around looking for something to show and tell. And the first thing I can see is deeply buried under many things, but it's a cutting board that I won at a Build Reuse conference from a lumber salvage organization. So that's my show and tell. Describe
very
it
good. Anyone else? We've got a couple more minutes. We're just doing quick introductions if you're just joining us. And if you have an example of a reuse, repair, repurpose project that you have done in your own home.
I can go. I'm Annie Pottorff, and I'm a sustainability specialist with the City of St. Louis Park. I work really closely with Emily Barker and our solid waste team, and I also help out and volunteer with Reuse Minnesota. So excited to be here. I'm going to try to show and tell this. My boyfriend is a woodworker, so he repurposes pallet wood a lot, and he made this sort of, here we go, this shelf for me out of old pallets. So we've got a lot of those around our house.
Perfect. Love it. I'm always I love all the pallet projects out there, and I haven't actually done any, but I think that they're a great opportunity.
They work good for putting a walkway across a wetland.
There you go.
Up north.
Great example. My example was also from the family cabin. We had some carpet squares that were getting pulled up at our office, and instead of throwing them away, they offered them up, and so I hoarded a whole bunch, and we carpeted the whole floor at the cabin. So it's like taking work home. All right. Am I missing a few people? I'm having a hard time seeing our whole list in our room right now.
Got quite a few.
And we keep having people join us, which is great. I'm gonna go ahead and take us out of the breakout rooms and bring us all back to the full group. And if I missed you, I apologize, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box to everyone. And we will get going. So I'm going to kick everyone out. I'm not even going to warn anyone. This will be fun. Even when you warn people, there's still always someone talking mid-sentence that gets cut off, it seems like. It's taking a few minutes here.
A lot of people on that list.
So
it's great that it's so well attended.
Yes, it's really great. You know, it's been interesting. This is probably our 4th or 5th workshop, all virtual since COVID, and I think every month we're getting more and more attendees. The first one was a little empty feeling, but oh man, everyone is just stuck in these breakout rooms.
I kind of feel like we should have a song and dance number, some elevator music or something to fill this pause.
For the Jeopardy
I think
music.
Kristen is just trying to reassemble the rooms. There we go.
I felt like everybody was staring at me, even though nobody was, because I didn't have my camera. But
Just like the awkward, there's like 6 people actually on my screen, and everybody else is just little dots around the bottom. But like, who is actually looking? I don't know.
Okay, I think everyone's back. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, it kicked me out. I might be on here twice now, but it looks like everyone is back in the main room. I hope I don't have anyone stuck in a breakout room. So technology, always fun.
Right.
Great. I hope that was worthwhile. It was really fun to watch the show and tell board get populated, even though I wasn't hearing about those examples. So thanks for participating in that. And I think we can go ahead and jump into some of our presentations. So I'm gonna let Erin introduce yourself, and then maybe you want to introduce Melissa as well. And I believe you're going to share your screen, so take it away.
Okay, thanks. Everybody, I'm Erin, Hanafin, Berg. I'm with Rethos Places Reimagined. We're the organization, the nonprofit organization that used to be the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, but we changed our name about 1.5 years ago. And Rethos is a partner with GreenStep cities. So I sit on the, as the representative for the organization on the GreenStep Cities Steering Committee. And then I also serve as one of the best practices advisors in, the areas of building reuse and all of the things that kind of go along with that. So we had thought several months ago that this would be a really great topic, partly because there's been so much thought and energy, human energy given to the topic over the past year or so. And Melissa Wenzel from the MPCA is on today. She wasn't able to be an actual presenter, but she found time on her schedule to be able to actually be here in the room with us. So she provided most of the material and slides that I'm going to be sharing with you, but she's also here kind of as a resource for us and to correct anything that I might might misstate if the need arises. And then she helped me connect with all the other panelists this morning. So Shari and Olivia and Emily will be on to tell more about their perspective and the work that they're doing in their communities and with their programs. So I'm gonna do the sharing here. Let's see if this actually works. And can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Like it. All right, so I'm gonna start with the thing. So yeah, talking about construction, demolition, and building material reuse. And as I understand it, the way that this kind of started being a focus area of the MPCA was that they were looking at some of the groundwater related landfill or groundwater related problems that landfills and unlined landfills in particular were providing and to the environment. And so there was this kind of prioritization of addressing those issues that led to some stakeholder meetings to talk about C&D waste in these landfills throughout the state. And that was actually my first connection with the MPCA's work on this, because I had heard about those. They invited preservation agencies and professionals to participate in those meetings. And I was real interested in doing that. And so this was funny because it was pre-COVID, obviously, back in 2018. And the whole idea of virtual meetings was still a little new. So it was a little bit cumbersome in there were some technical difficulties in actually connecting from place to place. But we participated in those meetings, and out of that work, there were some work groups that were created to better identify the needs and the focus areas, and to move this forward in terms of understanding the problem, but also in directing some policy and some recommendations. And one of the questions that they looked at first were what were the materials that ended up going to landfills and capping them, or causing the water impacts and also just filling them up. And so they did this assessment to realize that the vast majority of the loads that were going to landfills were made out of building products. So roofing shingles, concrete, and wood materials combined were 59% of the loads, but there was also some brick, wallboard, other construction and demolition materials that made up most of that. And that is a statistic at the state level that is pretty in keeping with the statistics at a national level of how much construction and demolition debris is generated every year and how that compares to municipal solid waste. So in 2018, the EPA estimated 600 million tons of C&D debris, and that's twice the amount of municipal solid waste. So for all of the work that communities are doing and really trying to lessen the amount of things that people are throwing in the trash by having really robust composting programs and recycling programs, we're still needing, like, most of the stuff that's going to our landfills is construction and demolition debris, and we need to solve that problem if we're going to get a handle on all of this. I also looked at a book called, I had it here, it's a building reuse study that was actually taking into account more of our kinds of concerns about buildings, which is, reusing them in place as much as possible and repurposing them rather than demolishing them in the first place. But we recognize that that's not always possible or desirable. And so, we're interested in understanding how building materials can be repurposed as well. And, part of the reality is we live in a built environment. We have buildings and other infrastructure constructed all around us. And a lot of that is aging, or there's, a desire to redevelop around it or on top of it. And the Brookings Institution had done some work in identifying or trying to track, what the building consumption rate essentially was. And they estimated that between 2005, so that was 15 years ago, and looking out another 10 years, so over a 25-year period, that 82 billion square feet of existing buildings in the US would be demolished and replaced. And that's overall a third of our US building stock. So, if you think of the block that you're on and think of 1 in 3 buildings being torn down and replaced, you can imagine the scale of this kind of problem. And really, buildings are some of the largest and most expensive products of human activity that we have on our planet in terms of both economic and environmental costs. One of my preservation colleagues and longtime friends had pointed me to this article that was just in last week's online issue of Smithsonian, talking about how that human-made materials like steel, concrete, and plastic now outweigh all life on Earth, are estimated to outweigh. And most of that is because of concrete, but also steel, gravel, brick, and asphalt. And that's, like microbes and everything. If you if you add in all of the biomass and weigh that against all of the things that humans, because we're the only ones that make stuff like this, have made, that that now outweighs all of the bio stuff. And of course, there's buildings consume a lot of energies and materials in their construction and in their operation. And we focus a lot on the energy, savings and, weatherization or green energy sources. But the consumption piece is also really, really important. And, that's a fixed cost to an extent with existing buildings, but it's always going to be a new cost in our overall carbon impact when we're talking about building new, regardless of whether it's a green building or not. And, here's some statistics just about the building construction and operation purposes, rather than construction and operation are 70% of all energy consumption, and that does contribute 48% of our CO2 emissions. Thinking about it in terms of a residential scale, the sizes of our homes have increased pretty dramatically over this, the last quarter century or so. And that results in 3 times the amount of construction materials. And thinking about this from a preservation and home rehabilitation kind of angle, buildings that are 75 or that were built in the 70s are now aging pretty fast. There's a fair amount of maintenance and replacement and repair that has to happen of building stock that age, because they're almost 50 and things, buildings take wear and tear. There was also kind of a time period when, we'd used up all of our virgin materials. So we used up all of our old growth lumber. We used up the things that were stable, and we were experimenting with a lot of new materials that frankly didn't have quite the same longevity. So the 1970s was the year that we were trying things like composite siding, but without a cementitious part in it. So it was essentially just wood chips and glue that were stuck together. That kind of stuff doesn't have the lifespan of older, more tried and true materials, and is more likely to end up having to be tossed out. But where can we salvage what's salvageable, and make sure that we're concentrating our resources on replacing things that just don't have the lifespan to be able to be continually used. This is a graphic that that Melissa shared with me, just showing the amount of energy and materials that go into a pretty basic 2,000 square foot home. This is actually smaller than what the average new home size is in the US now. And it's a lot of stuff. It's a whole lot of stuff that goes in there. And then there's the whole environmental impact of actually demolishing things and transporting and disposing of them. You know, if you've seen a building go down in your community and how many truckloads of debris is hauled away, you know, that's heavy equipment and it spews out a lot of carbon in its operation, and it takes a lot of wear and tear on the roads and things like that too. So deconstruction is a much and more environmentally friendly and far less impactful than using heavy equipment to remove a building that is no longer needed on its site. You know, and we recycle all these other things. Back to that municipal solid waste argument. We recycle paper and glass and aluminum, but we don't apply that same sense of responsibility for that life cycle continuum to the things that we make the most of in terms of mass, and that's our buildings. This is a life cycle stages graphic that I borrowed from the Greenest Building report that the National Trust for Historic Preservation had done about 8 years ago now. They've done a lot of research into how historic buildings can be green, and what the circumstances are where a renovation of a historic building you know, maximizes the investment that's already been made in it, so that it's not impacting further the environment. And they had this great loop about extraction and then transformation and manufacture and transportation and use. And I love how this kind of, I'm probably doing it the wrong way on my screen, but there's this, you know, circular piece that we don't do that. We maybe go once around the circle and then we go out the other end to the end of life. And can we spend a lot more time in that circular space before we decide that it's time to throw things in the trash? You know, and just kind of as a preservation person and you know, working in this field for quite a long time, you know, all the times that people have said, you know, lamented our tendency to throw a, you know, 80 or 90-year-old building away. But in Europe, you know, they're 500 years. And I'm like, yeah, and they're not serving the same purpose that they were built for 500 years ago. There's all kinds of transformation of use, transformation of spaces sometimes, and then, you know, how those buildings function is completely different than it was when it was first built. And if there's a phrase that I hate more than anything in preservation, it's functionally obsolete. This, you know, idea that a building that might still be solid enough to have a continued life, but it's functionally obsolete, so it has to be disposed of. Let's just find a new use for it instead, or find a way to reuse those materials. So this is another slide that Melissa shared with me, and I think Shari will talk a little bit more about this too, about how we can tip that traditional waste hierarchy upside down so that we're really focusing more on, one, the waste prevention by reducing our use of materials, and that's somewhat and on the onus of the people who are designing and producing these things to make sure that they are using as few materials as possible, but also that those things can be recycled or repurposed rather than having to be used up and thrown away. And then use that reuse and recycle and have, you know, those top layers in the new waste management paradigm be the ones that we focus on the most. One of the kind of, you know, as people have been giving a lot of thought to this over the past year, there was a really great webinar that Reuse Minnesota and I'm going to blank on what the organization, the national organization's name is, but was hosted as a webinar. It was supposed to be in person, of course, but it was hosted as a webinar over the summer. And Joe Connell, who is a consultant in Maine, who does this kind of building deconstruction and reuse consulting, talked about how, you know, for all of history, we've deconstructed things and reconstructed things with salvaged materials, and that our demolition paradigm really only became standard after World War II. And part of that was, you know, our national psyche at that time of, you know, progress and improvement and embracing all things new and advancing our society and all that kind of stuff that somewhat worked. In other ways, totally didn't. And then, you know, there's been some architectural salvage for really high value materials, you know, light fixtures or antique furniture or things like that. But just the things that went into building and, you know, like making these buildings stand in the first place has really languished. But there have been is an uptick in that over the last couple of decades. Reuse centers and deconstruction have really taken hold in other parts of the country, on the West Coast, on the East Coast. And we would really just love to see there be more opportunity and more infrastructure and planning put to that here in Minnesota. And one of the things that Joe had pointed out was that, you know, we're also siloed and there's a really hard way of, or it's hard for us to kind of connect all these dots so that we can repurpose these materials and salvage things and reuse them, partly because our whole building industry is just built on very different systems that don't understand each other, that don't speak to each other. And it also makes it easier for us to not really fully understand the choices that we're making in doing that. So this is another slide from Melissa talking about the building material management system map. And when I first saw this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so confusing. And she said, that's exactly the point. It's very confusing. There's a lot of people doing a lot of different things, but it's not a linear or even a clear circular process. So how would we make this into a less complex system that can actually, people can speak the same language and work together on all of these things? And out of the work that Melissa was leading at the MPCA and that folks were involved in all across the state, they formed these sustainable building groups. So this was the next thing that came out of those initial 2018 stakeholder meetings, talking about a lot of these issues and involving people from all kinds of sectors related in that really complex building systems map. And then formed some criteria for making their decisions together, understanding that there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, but that there needs to be some incremental change made in a lot of different areas. And then they came out with that, a whole bunch of ideas that they narrowed down to 6 recommendations. And these are those recommendations. I think Olivia and Shari and Emily will be able to talk more about how these kinds of recommendations are being carried forward at their organizations and at their cities. But one was to establish a statewide state-funded deconstruction training program. We really don't have the youth, the workforce available to do this at a scale that would make it truly impactful. We love the second recommendation to create an incentive for reuse and preservation of buildings, and of course to make those energy efficient, but to recognize that keeping them reused in place is the best option, and then the second best option is finding a new use for all those materials. Creating deconstruction ordinances. There's other cities and other parts of the country that have done this pretty successfully, and help incentivize more preservation, but also manage the materials that are created if a building is demolished. And then some more diversion requirements for C&D waste, and then creating more incentives to reuse and facilitate the repair and reuse of new construction and building renovations. And then I think that I'm going to try to switch to a different screen and share this cute little video, cute but impactful video from Fox News. And I gotta hold on, make sure that I'm going to the share my, Sorry, I'm clicking around and hitting buttons. I have to include my computer sound. Here we go. So I'll go back here and play this. Can you hear that?
It's really soft. And try turning up your audio, maybe. And you're not sharing your screen yet either, so maybe that'll make a difference.
Sorry. I'm not sharing my screen again?
Nope.
Oh, so sorry. Let me figure this out. Share content. That explains probably why it's so quiet, right? I think this is where I want to be.
There we go. Oh, not hearing audio, Erin.
Still not hearing audio? Is that what you said, Kristen?
No.
Of course, it's yelling at me. So I don't understand. Let me one more. Okay, I gotta include the sound, do this. All right, let me try it one more time.
St. Louis County has partnered with One Minnesota organization to help deconstruct tax forfeited and blighted properties in the Duluth area. Fox 21's Jane Kim in the studio here with more on how this program is not only helping the environment, but also providing opportunities for those who need it.
St. Louis County, along with Better Futures Minnesota, is working to deconstruct several properties in Duluth.
The process will remove raw materials, which include lumber, windows, and hardwood flooring. Those items in turn will be up for sale for other projects. As an organization, Better Futures employs men who were previously incarcerated and gives them an opportunity filled with both hope and a future.
It's amazing how they help us, how they help guide us in the right direction. I mean, a person already has to want to, do some change and stuff like that, but being in a program like this, it makes it 10 times easier.
Melvin Stewart is a job site foreman and has been working with Better Futures for the past year or so. He says that having a job like this one is beneficial, and he is grateful for the skills he has learned along the way.
We're a real full, comprehensive program. I like everything I do about my job pretty much. I mean, helping guys out, teaching guys the stuff I know. Even the learning part when I was first learning about deconstruction.
One of the properties in the deconstruction process is this two-story house on South 62nd Avenue West, built in 1906. Inspections of the building determined that it had reached the end of its useful life, which allowed the workers to strip it of any valuable resources. Leadership from Better Futures say they are happy to have the chance to benefit different aspects of society.
It's a wonderful feeling, honestly. In terms of what we're doing, there's environmental benefits, social benefits, and I feel we are definitely helping out the community.
And those with the county are grateful to have Better Futures working alongside them for this project.
Our results have been very good. Better Futures at this point, the product that they're putting out there as far as the training and being able to come in and deconstruct these, we see it getting better and better.
When the deconstruction process is complete, St. Louis County will receive a clean site.
And it should be noted, 2 other properties are also in the deconstruction process in St. Louis County. In the studio, Jane Kim, Fox 21 Local News.
There. All right, let me go back to not sharing my screen. And then I guess that's all that I have for this morning to kick us off. Actually, I will come back later and tell you a little bit more about some of the Rethos programming that ties in well with this topic and with other GreenStep cities work. So in the meantime, though, I will kick it over to Shari, right?
Yep.
All
Thanks,
right.
Erin.
Yep. Thanks, Erin.
And Melissa, I know you helped Erin put together some of those slides. So
Melissa was a huge help.
Thank you for saying that. And for those of you who don't know, I've been redeployed to the Minnesota Department of Health. I'm actually helping out with calling people that are positive for COVID. And that just started 3 weeks ago. So I didn't think I could be here at all. And so Erin and I worked offline. She did a great job, better than I would have done, to present the information in a perspective. So, and thank you, Shari, Emily, and Olivia for your future presentations. So we have some of the work on hold. Call volumes are down, call volumes are up, and the number of cases of COVID are down. And so I can transition a little bit of my time back to the MPCA, which I'm thrilled because that's where I belong in my heart. So keep up doing good work, and I look forward to working with you if you're still very, very interested in this topic as I am.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Thank you for your service and everything that you're doing. And Melissa is a really great resource too for those of you who are interested in working in this area a little bit more. So do reach out to her maybe in a few weeks. All right, so I will share my screen for Shari, and you just let me know when I need to go to the next slide.
Okay, great. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to say when Olivia and Emily talk, they're going to be giving you some very specific examples of what's going on in their cities. My story is still kind of aspirational, but I'm hoping that you'll still get some good information out of it. So next slide, please. So I thought what I'd do is tell you a little bit about our city and then a little bit about how I've gotten involved in what I'm hoping to accomplish eventually. So Sunfish Lake is a very small city. We were first incorporated as a village in 1958. We are a completely residential community. We have 3 churches, but no businesses. We're about 5 miles south of St. Paul, and we have roughly 525 residents. We'll see if that changes with the latest count. I just lost the word, sorry. We're about 1.7 square miles in size. We have 3 small private lakes, which we take their care of very seriously. And we contract out all of our city services. So all of us on city council and city planning are volunteers, but we use local services from West St. Paul and Mendota Heights for our police and fire. Okay, next slide. We have been a tree city for the last 30 years. We take our trees very seriously. In fact, if you want to build a house or remodel, you have to talk with our city forester, and he will come out and inventory every tree on your property and talk with you about what can be cut down, what should be cut down, and then what you're going to replace after a project. So the consistent goal of our city government for the last 50, 60 years has been to maintain our rural atmosphere. All lots have to be at least 2.5 acres of buildable size. So most of our homes are acre plus lots. And we really try to disturb the natural environment as little as possible. Next slide, please. So I think it was 2015, our city forester and I were asked if we would undertake the process of helping Sunfish Lake become a GreenStep city. And we managed to do that in May of 2016. We picked 5 different best practices. The first 3 were from the environmental management category. And then we have 1 land use category and 1 from the economic and community development category. So again, we're really small. We don't have any city infrastructure. So it was a little bit difficult for us to figure out how we could be a GreenStep city, but we're very proud of the fact that we did. Next slide, please. So how I got involved. We built our home here in Sunfish Lake in 1996. And I remember it being just kind of scary to go in front of our planning commission because I didn't know anything about the process. So in 2014, when I was asked to be on the planning commission, I thought it would be a great way to get to know the city and more of my neighbors and how things happen. And then in the fall of 2015, I had a chance to take the Dakota County Master Recycler class. And that's when I really started to understand that recycling is kind of in the middle of what we need to be doing to keep our environment safe. And I'll talk about that a little bit more again in a minute. And in 2015, I started a decluttering business because I really wanted that to tie into what I'd learned about recycling and helping people get rid of things, but keep things out of the landfill, whether it was donating it for reuse or selling it for reuse or taking things to our recycling zone, but not just throwing things away. So then I think it was the spring of 2017, we started reviewing our city comprehensive plan. And now that I had all this recycling knowledge in my head, I really wanted to make sure that we incorporated that into our comprehensive plan. So we're going through this process, and a space became available on our city council. So I was asked to move there. So I'd gotten to work on the comprehensive plan from the plan, and then I got to go to the city council for it. So we'll talk about that again a little bit more in a minute. Next slide, please. So Erin referred to this waste hierarchy, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit too, because you can see here, the third thing down from the top is recycle. So we really talked about in the class about how we can reduce what we're making in the first place and how we can make sure that we're reusing things. And again, as I was learning about this, just in homes, it started to dawn on me that we're not doing this with our buildings in our city. So how can I start to bring that to the forefront so that we're thinking about it in our city? Okay, next slide. So now we'll go back to our comprehensive plan. And every time we have conversations, I'm talking to people about, well, we need to be talking more about recycling. We need to be talking about when we're tearing down houses, how can we do this in more environmentally friendly ways? And I wasn't very successful, but we did manage to talk about and have now in the plan under our general land use that we're going to continue to require high standards of development. You know, that's good, but kind of wishy-washy. And then under the housing policies, we can talk, or we have in place now, encourage construction, which uses energy efficient designs. That's great, but I still don't think it goes far enough. And then again, when we're doing building demolitions, they'll be environmentally sensitive and subject to MPCA rules, but there's no teeth to that. And I just couldn't get people to move forward to put anything a little stronger language in. So I'm getting frustrated. Okay, next slide. Then we get to the spring of 2019, and I'm actually working with a decluttering client that lives in Sunfish Lake, and they live on the lake. They have this beautiful old home with old growth wood floors and cabinets and metal pulls on all the cabinets, and it's just beautiful. And as we're working through the house, taking things to the Goodwill and taking things to Neighbors Inc. to be reused or taking things to the recycling zone, they told me that the house was going to be demolished and a new house was going to be built. So I started asking questions. Is somebody going to come in and salvage anything? Is any deconstruction going to take place? And I couldn't get any answers or anybody to tell me that, yes, we're going to take the time and effort to do this. So again, it was just really starting to bother me. Next slide. So I called our county recycling coordinator. Her name is Cassandra. And Cassandra happens to work for Sunfish Lake and also Mendota Heights and West St. Paul. So I asked her, are any of your cities doing anything in terms of deconstruction or salvage or any kind of work like that? And she didn't think we were doing that in our county. So she suggested I call Emily Barker, who you're going to hear from later. And I just happened to catch Emily the day before the MPCA groups were going to kick off, the sustainable building groups. So I went to that meeting and met so many people who were just passionate about this issue and engaged about this issue. So I was just so uplifted and hopeful that maybe I could bring something to our city eventually. So I had a chance to join the Regulation for Collaboration work group and learned so much just about how a deconstruction project or demolition project happens. There's all these different timelines involved and you have to get the asbestos out first. And so I learned a lot that I didn't know. But I also learned that there's definitely time in the process if you start to have some conversations up front. So I got to know Melissa a little bit, and I told her about what I was trying to do in my city and that, I was just frustrated. And she agreed to come and meet with some people. So next slide, please. So in February, Melissa came to one of our planning commission meetings. And after the meeting, we sat down with our mayor, with our building inspector, the planning commission chair, and our city planner. And she laid out what Erin did about this big group that's been happening with the MPCA and what they're trying to accomplish and why the whole issue has come up. And that I would like to see our city be maybe a model city or at least have a deconstruction ordinance. So we had this meeting and everybody nodded and went away. And what Melissa helped me create to start with was a demolition and remodeling guidance for best practices, because we figured that at least we could get that going. And maybe we could move towards an ordinance at some point. And while I was doing this, I was doing some other research and found this mayoral sustainability summit that had happened back in 2008. And it just so happens that the mayor from Burnsville was a key player in that summit. So I called her office and managed to set up a meeting, and I was going to go meet with her. And then the COVID shutdowns came. So everything kind of got put on hold. Next slide. But luckily, during the COVID shutdown, at least the MPCA groups continue to meet. So as we talked about with Erin, the all those different ideas filtered down to 6. Sorry, I wrote 5, but it was actually 6 that got carried forward. But also during this time, our city went through 3 different city planners. So every time I thought, well, now would be a good time to at least bring up my ideas, the planner would change. So that just kept getting put on hold in the background. But the MPCA groups were meeting, and we did come up with an idea to create a statewide deconstruction ordinance template for cities to use. Next slide, please. So in that recommendation, we wanted to have a ready to adopt template that cities could use. And the goals were to reduce the environmental and climate impacts, reduce the amount of demolition and waste that was going to the landfill. Because as Erin said, we make twice as much construction and demolition waste as we do municipal solid waste. So all the recycling programs we have in the city are great, but we're not going to make a huge impact on the environment unless we start looking at the buildings and how we're taking them down. We wanted to minimize adverse health risks and create standardized terminology, because that's one of the things we realized too, is we're all talking about slightly different things. And if you look at ordinances from one city or one state, we need to have some standard terminology. And then we also realized that we need to expand deconstruction skills, and we can create jobs across the state to do this. Next slide. So going forward, what I'm hoping, at the very least, I can bring this best practices document to our city council, and we can start to have some conversations so that we instill a sense of responsibility in our community. Like I said before, we care so much about our trees and our lakes, but I just can't seem to get people to make the jump to understand that there's some bigger issues in the environment that we could be addressing by looking at how we're taking down buildings and what we're sending to the landfill. If we can start these conversations up front, at the very least, like I said, we'd have a huge impact. So work towards the deconstruction ordinance with the MPCA group. Maybe even we can get GreenStep cities to have it as a best practice to have an ordinance in your city. And I really want to try to meet with the mayor of Burnsville just to see what they've done and if there's anything that we can learn from them to help our city get better. And the good news to me is that I just got reelected, so I have 4 more years to work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Shari. I love that presentation. You did such a good job of walking through what you went through as a city and where you're at and what your next steps are. And maybe that means that, another city out there interested in doing some work in this area doesn't have to go through all of that. You found Melissa through a person and a person and a person. And now we all can just go to Melissa.
Absolutely.
Or et cetera,
She's a great resource.
So thank you so much for sharing that. And I as new resources get developed, this is certainly something we want to get added into the GreenStep program as a best practice. And certainly as you continue your work in Sunfish Lake, we hope that that's something you can check off the GreenStep box and get added to your action report. So thank you so much for sharing. Erin, do you want to introduce the next speaker?
Yes, as soon as I can find my unmute button again, which I have to look someplace else. So Olivia Cashman is with Hennepin County. She showed us in our small breakout group a wonderful little reuse project of her own that highlights her work with Hennepin County in a very creative way. But also, and I'm afraid I'm gonna blank on your actual title, Olivia. So I'll just let you take it away if that's okay.
I'm on mute. Sounds good. Thank you, Erin, and happy to be here this morning with all of you, and really have enjoyed the presentation so far. And Shari, just want to congratulate you on your re-election. That's super exciting and awesome news. So I will share my screen, and if there's any issues seeing it, if you could just let me know.
You look good.
Okay, sounds good. So I am, again, with Hennepin County Environment and Energy. I am an environmental protection specialist there. I work on construction and demolition waste, both from the hazardous material side and also from the recycling and reuse deconstruction side. So I will talk about a little bit of both those areas today. If I can get to my next slide. Just a quick background on our department. The mission of our department is to reduce and responsibly manage waste, protect land and water, take action on climate change, promote environmental stewardship, and Hennepin County serves 45 cities and over 1.2 million residents. So I know Erin gave a really great, thorough background on construction demolition waste, so I won't spend too much time on these slides, but just kind of like to have a baseline of kind of what we're talking about here and why this is an issue, to reiterate again the need for these programs and policies. So C&D waste, or construction and demolition, which I'll be referring to as C&D because of course we love acronyms here. Materials include things like asphalt, brick, cabinets, concrete, kind of anything, you know, that really makes the bones of a structure, as you can see in this image. And I think the important note here is that C&D waste is not included in MSW or municipal solid waste. I know this fact was already covered, but I'm going to say it again because it's just so insanely huge, is that the EPA estimated that 600 million tons of C&D waste was generated in 2018, and that is more than twice the amount of MSW generated in that same time. So I put that on a chart just to show like that is, I mean, it's a crazy amount of material that we're dealing with here in C&D waste. And I also think it's really important to note that while construction and demolition waste includes both aspects of building new structures and also removing old ones, demolition represents 90% of that material. So about 70% of materials in a demolition project in Hennepin County we've estimated go to a landfill. The kind of positive note is that 85% of those materials in a demolition project could be salvaged or recycled. So there is some hope here and opportunities to reuse some of that material and get it back in the market. So just wanted to provide those facts. And also kind of talk about why there is so much C&D waste. It's kind of a vague question, but redevelopment is a huge driver of construction and demolition waste. You can see in the image to the right here, this is a apartment complex coming up in downtown Minneapolis. And you know, if you're in the metro area here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or even, you know, greater Minnesota, there's development happening everywhere, it seems like. And this waste is big and bulky. These are large materials, large some concrete, etc. And another kind of challenge is that markets for some C&D materials, such as carpet and drywall, haven't been fully developed, or there's challenges based on those materials. So just another kind of reason that there's a lot of challenges here. So Hennepin County has been interested in C&D waste for a number of years and has really dove into it the last couple years specifically. So I want to just talk about some of the things we've done to help divert C&D waste, and then I'll dive into a couple of these topics more specifically throughout the presentation. So one, they have hired a staff to focus on diverting C&D waste, which was huge since in our department, no one was specifically working on this. People were interested, but so now I'm working on both the hazardous waste material side and recycling side. We've launched a pre-demolition inspection program. We've also launched a deconstruction grant program. I will talk about both of those in the upcoming slides. We've created educational materials for cities and partners, residents that they can use for their audiences and also use for themselves as informational opportunities. We've been contracting with Better Futures Minnesota, which was featured on that video Erin played for a number of years, and that's to subsidize the cost of deconstruction. And we've partnered with them on a number of other projects too, and have been a really great partner, and you know, are looking for ways to continue to work with them. And I believe Emily is going to talk about this event in her presentation, so I won't elaborate too much, but we partnered with St. Louis Park to host a building material drop-off event in the fall of 2019, and we were hoping to host another event in 2020, as well as partner with additional cities to host a similar event, but with the COVID pandemic, that hasn't been able to happen. So I'm hopeful that at some point in the future, we'll be able to host those events again and give residents an opportunity to easily drop off their building materials and then donate those to organizations. So I think Emily will have more on that, but that's to come. So I want to start by talking about our pre-demolition inspection program that we started about a year and a half ago. I think it's really important when we're talking about building material reuse to also talk about the hazards that are inherent in some of these building materials. It's important that we're looking at things like asbestos, lead, and mercury at these materials and making sure that those are safely removed or disposed of before they're entering back into the marketplace. And this is to protect both consumers and also workers in these facilities that may take these items. So we've started pre-demolition inspections to go through properties before they're demolished and make sure any hazardous or regulated material is removed. And then we track that to make sure that the contractor or property owner has actually disposed of those properly. And I want to give a shout out to Ramsey County. I think Molly Flynn is on the call, but they've had a pre-demo inspection program for a number of years and really helped us get this program up and running and have been a great resource. So been a great partner and have helped us start this inspection program. We're currently working with 17 of our 45 cities, and we get notified from those cities when they have a demolition permit application. Then I schedule the inspection with the contractor, meet them at the site, go through the property, and do any follow-up for items that might have been found. But these inspections are really a community benefit. It's ensuring that there's proper management of things like asbestos, lead, and mercury, like I mentioned, but also, proper management of dust. And so if, there's a home in your neighborhood coming down next to you, I'm sure we'd all want to make sure that those items are properly managed. So I think it's important to continue to talk about hazardous material management when we're talking about building material reuse. And now more on the building material reuse. I know we've talked a little bit about deconstruction so far this morning, but if you are still like, I just don't really understand what this phrase is, it is the process of carefully dismantling a building structure to preserve building materials so that they can be reused, either sold to maybe a architectural organization, or donated to a salvage organization, or maybe reuse on another project you have or that a neighbor has, or any way that it's going to be put back in place into the market. So on our website, we have listed a bunch of salvage businesses in the Twin Cities that take these types of items. And I have a video here that's pretty similar to the one that was played earlier. So instead of showing it, I'm just going to put the link in the chat if folks want to check it out after the webinar. But it shows a deconstruction grant project that we partnered with Better Futures on, and kind of walks through the process, but very similar to the one that was showed in Duluth. So that one. But more on our deconstruction grants. Hennepin County in February of 2020 started a pilot grant program to offer property owners up to $5,000 for projects to use deconstruction techniques. And really the goal of this program was to offer some funds to incentivize deconstruction, knowing that the additional time and labor it takes to dismantle these properties piece by piece often adds additional cost to the projects. And we wanted to make deconstruction a more attainable option for folks that have renovation or demolition projects. So this was a pilot year. It's been really great to kind of test waters and see what response we got, especially with the COVID pandemic. We started the program right before COVID hit, and we're able to do a few site visits to kind of vet properties beforehand. And then those site visits were cut off because of COVID. So we had to transition to kind of a virtual assessment of properties when applications came in, which has turned out to work really well. I'll often get either photos or materialists sent, also do FaceTime or Skype visits with the property owner to kind of walk through the project to make sure that their property meets all of our requirements. So some of those requirements is that the property needs to be built prior to 1970. We also have a number of different reuse and disposal criteria to make sure that the projects are going to divert enough material from the landfill to make them viable. And so far in 2020, we've had 13 projects completely finished this year, and we have 5 more in progress and a couple more applications that we're hoping to process by the end of the year, which leads me to next year's funding. We will be offering the grants again, and this year or last year, I'm sorry, we offered the grants to cities that were participating in our pre-demolition inspection program. So it was only open to residents of those 17 cities doing inspections with us. But at this point, we've kind of reached out to all the cities to get them involved in our inspections. And if they have not wanted to participate voluntarily, we want to open the grant funding up to all cities so that they are still have those funds accessible at this point. So we're really excited to kind of broaden our scope, and we're also looking at a couple of different eligibility requirements to increase funding for renovation projects. So we've seen a lot of applications come through on projects that have a renovation, and we just want to make sure those projects meet our material requirements. So more details on that will be coming early in the new year. And if you're curious, you can check out our website or email me to find those out. I have the next few slides are some before and after photos from deconstruction projects. This one I really love because it shows kind of the stages of the deconstruction. Again, if you're maybe familiar with it, you're like, oh, I know this, but if not, I still think it's interesting. So on the very left, you can see the full house structure, and then middle structure, that top floor has been removed. So I just think it's really cool to see them walking up and there's nothing left there. And then on the right, it's just the main floor. So seeing the stages of a deconstruction is really interesting to me, and I miss being able to go out to these sites to see that. So hopefully you enjoy these photos. And this one was from another grant project over in Minneapolis. On the left, you can see some really high value fixtures in the bathroom, and on the right, they're completely gone. And these were brought to, I think this was a Better Futures project, so brought to their warehouse in South Minneapolis to then be available for the public to come in and purchase those to fund their organization. This is another one of a exterior or fireplace pieces that were taken for the brick there. So in addition to, or a part of the reuse requirements that we have for the grant project is that any material that is not able to be deconstructed and reused, we require that these projects send that debris to a C&D recycling facility rather than straight to a C&D landfill. These facilities can recover up to 50% of the materials, so it's a lot more of a beneficial use looking at the waste hierarchy rather than if they were sent to a landfill. And we found that typically these facilities have a pretty comparable cost with a landfill, so it's kind of a maybe could be considered a low-hanging fruit, but I think it's a really great way to increase recycling and waste diversion from projects. So if you're working in a city or agency and folks are looking for ways to get involved with building material reuse on their project, but maybe don't want to dive into deconstruction, recommending these facilities is a really great way to kind of meet some of those goals, hopefully. And we have a couple county approved sites that we recommend for folks, and those are Atomic Recycling and DEMCON. And these are just a few examples of the resources we have available to cities and partners. We have both printed and PDF versions of these brochures on our website. We also have some newsletter and social media content in Word documents on our website that if folks are interested in sharing some information about building material reuse, you can pull those straight from our website and link those to your social media pages, or if you have a city newsletter that you want to use them in, feel free to just go to our website. It's Hennepin US/salvage, or you can email me and get them directly from me as well if you're interested in that. This kind of brings me to the end of the presentation of where do we go from here. We are, as I mentioned, going to offer deconstruction grants again in 2021, which I'm really excited about. We are going to continue our pre-demolition inspection program and hopefully still add more cities. We're also considering an ordinance update that would essentially require that cities work with us. We're not quite at that point yet, and when we do, we will definitely engage those cities before we would implement that. So more details on that as it gets developed. We are also working on a internal C&D waste policy for county projects that would have certain requirements for example, if there was a tax forfeited property looking at deconstruction for that site, or if there were, a project where a building would need to be torn down for a county road, also requiring deconstruction for those types of projects. So we're hoping that will be implemented in 2021 so that we can really walk the talk for these projects. And I think that's a really good, hopefully, opportunity for cities to implement that type of policy for internal work. We also want to work more on engaging and educating folks upstream in the process. So people like architects, realtors, and developers. I think maybe it was Erin or Shari mentioned that, it's the timeline for these projects. It always seems rushed once it gets to the phase when a demolition permit is actually issued, but in reality, these projects are talked about for a long time. And so I think it's important that we engage folks early on so that we can kind of talk about building material reuse and deconstruction ahead of the process so that it's not so rushed at the end. It doesn't seem like a last minute thing that's being added to the project. We also want to partner with other counties and agencies to offer deconstruction training and educational opportunities. I also participated in the MPCA stakeholder group, and I'm excited to see where those developments go, and hopefully we can continue to partner on those things. And then finally, I think it's important for all of us here who are interested in this topic, as well as our agencies or workplaces, to support building material salvage organizations so that we can really close the loop in this process and help support these businesses, especially in this tough economic time that we're facing, to make sure that we have those markets available to bring these materials to. So that is all that I have. I'm really excited that we're able to have this webinar today. So I want to thank Rethos and GreenStep cities. I just think it's so great we were able to connect virtually even in this time, and we're able to kind of keep the momentum going. So I did want to share the event display that I talked about. Since we aren't really going to events right now, this can become a virtual event to share. But this is made out of reclaimed wood, nails and thread, and I would use this at events to kind of show the importance of old growth lumber. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I would show kind of the rings here and how much more sturdy old growth lumber is compared to maybe a 2x4 you'd buy at Home Depot, for example. So that is all I have. If there's any questions, let me know, and thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. There are a couple questions in the chat you might be able to help answer if you want to take a look at those. Otherwise, we can try to circle back after our final presentations here to answer those questions as well. So with that, Erin, do you want to introduce our next speaker?
Yes, I saw that Emily had joined, but now she's going to dim the lights in her room with the shades. Sorry to put her on the spot. But Emily Barker is with the city of St. Louis Park. And again, in putting all this together, she was one of the first names that Melissa mentioned because of the good work that St. Louis Park is doing in utilizing some of these resources that Hennepin County has made available. And I just thought it would be a really great idea to see some of the work that Emily is doing. So thank you.
Thank you so very much. I am excited to be here. Can you hear me all right? Okay, perfect. I jumped on earlier and realized my microphone wasn't working, and so I had to switch that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead, the share screen here. Okay, the first thing I want to share, because I didn't get one put into the thing, I wanted to show you from, I know I missed the first part of your meeting because I had an appointment, but this was my reuse, my personal reuse. I turned a entertainment center into a play kitchen for my son when we moved into our house. So there's my fun little reuse for you all. So if you have people wondering what the heck you do with entertainment centers since no one seems to use them anymore, there you go. All right, now we'll go back to the presentation here. All right, is that looking okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks so much for the introduction. As they mentioned, my name is Emily Barker and I work for the City of St. Louis Park. I previously worked for the state, and that's how I know Melissa originally. And I have been really excited about the building materials reuse issue and question for several years now. I work primarily in the regular recycling, the day-to-day curbside recycling world. And as important as I think that is, I realized that the value of salvaging and reusing building materials is so high that it is something that as cities and counties and the state, we can no longer continue to ignore. And not that it was completely ignored before, but that we really need to prioritize it on a larger scale. I was very lucky to also be involved with that stakeholder process the last year and connected close with Shari and Olivia and Melissa and on these questions of ordinances and how cities can prioritize these types of things. So I'm going to be sharing a few things that the City of St. Louis Park has done over the last couple of years. And they haven't been my projects, but they've been something that I have helped push and pull a little bit at times as we've gone, and really to encourage our internal staff to consider and look at, and as well as our public. First, I want to talk about why, in addition to my personal interest, St. Louis Park has a long history of recycling and sustainability. We were the first organized curbside recycling program and one of the first organized organics program. We just have had this as a priority for our city council and staff for many years, and it makes sense that we would work on kind of the next important thing. We are currently a step 4 green city, and that's something our staff have really worked hard on. I believe that was the step 4 was achieved this June, and so they've worked hard to get us to the place where we are. And we know that deconstruction and reuse of building materials can be part of that GreenStep effort as well. We also have a climate action plan, which doesn't currently incorporate anything with building material reuse, but it's something we've been talking about with staff about when that gets updated next, that we would really like to include something about this, whether it's a mandate or an optional thing, but a push to really encourage deconstruction throughout our city. The first thing that we did was already 2 years ago, which is hard to believe. In September of 2018, the city purchased a foreclosure. It was a small single-family home, which you can see sort of on the left there. And this was purchased because there's an area that's along a busier city street, Minnetonka Boulevard, that is kind of a funny, it was 4 homes, or it is 4 homes between an apartment building and a church. And it's kind of an odd space for single family homes. And the idea is to have it be rezoned for lower income, either row housing or not duplexes, but like townhome type style. And this house was purchased because it was vacant, it was having some vandalism, and it was kind of one of these problem properties anyway. And the city purchased that, and then I kind of said, well, why, instead of just bulldozing this thing, why don't we actually practice what we preach? And one of the things was the fire and the police department also wanted their shot at using the building. For those of you who don't work for or aren't connected with those, your police and fire like these kind of buildings because they can go in and they can bust out walls in their training and not feel bad about it because it's already a home that's had some damage. And we said, well, you can do that, but can you please not damage these things? And please leave the floors alone. The plaster walls are fine because those are all unfortunately not salvageable, but please don't break these windows that aren't already broken and things like that. And they were really accommodating. We had a nice walkthrough with all the departments as well as Better Futures. Better Futures was the partner on this. I assume their name has come up because I haven't been on yet. I'll just make sure they're a nonprofit here in the Twin Cities Metro that does a lot of deconstruction work. And I have been familiar with them for years. And fortunately, due to the county's support through their, not the grant program directly for residents, but through some funding they've had to help subsidize deconstruction. This project, the deconstruction portion, was actually completely covered through Hennepin support. So that was obvious, other than the removal of the foundation, which was recycled. The Better Futures doesn't do that part, but the actual deconstruction costs and process was covered, which was awesome. Every project that Better Futures does, they put together a summary of the benefits, the materials salvaged, the kind of climate calculations and impacted, and the information here on the screen shows from that project what was salvaged. So they were able to reclaim about 4.2%, which is great. I know a lot of times the average for reuse, the estimate is around 5%. Like I said, this house already had some damage and many things had already been removed, like appliances. So there were a number of things that were already gone or just beyond repair. But it was pretty amazing the stuff that was in that house. They collected a lot of dimensional lumber. This home was post-war, late 1940s. Some good quality lumber as well as flooring. And then of course a lot was recycled, including primarily the foundation, and then material landfilled. I'm going to show you a couple of pictures here. This is the lead staff person for the deconstruction project, Terry. That board he's looking at, I was joking, I've done a few small construction projects or remodeling things. The boards they pull out of that house that were 70 years old were better than anything and straighter than anything I've ever seen at Home Depot or Menards that you could find today. They were just amazingly good condition. And that just shows the value of this, sort of why we need to sort of rethink how we view reuse of lumber and a whole lot of other things I don't have time to get into today, but it was just pretty amazing what there was. I am gonna switch out. I didn't think about how this would work. Let me see if I can. I'm going to share a quick video. I didn't practice this transition part. Let me just see if I can share this video instead. Oh, blasted. Okay, where did my apologies. Let's see if I can get it from my PowerPoint here and share it that.
I went through this earlier, Emily, so it's all good.
Yeah. Yes. Let me. I don't know why it's. I opened it. Okay. I don't know why I'm not seeing my. Well, let's see here. Apologies, I have it open and I'm just not seeing it on my, oh, because I gotta scroll down. Hello, there we go. Okay. Okay. All right, can you see this video where it says deconstruction of a home on Minnetonka Boulevard?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Oh, but did I share the audio?
Doesn't sound like it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, this is all new for everyone still.
Okay, include computer sound. There we go. You told me that and I just skipped right over it. Okay, here we are.
Perfect.
All right, that one's quick. I am going to go ahead and just also do the Westwood Hills one, even though I was going to do that after. I'm going to talk about the Nature Center next, but I'm going to just do this one right away so I don't have to futz around with the switching back and forth. So this is the next one we did this year. All right, so that'll give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about next. Let me go into my presentation again. All right, so we also this year had the opportunity to do deconstruction of a city-owned property, a city facility. And the reason for this is the city built a new nature center building. The current or the previous one had been there for about 30 years and unfortunately was just very small and it wasn't super accessible. So they actually decided to move the physical location closer to the parking lot. Previously it was up this big hill and it was really just not ideal for a lot of folks to get to. And they decided to like I said, move that. And so that allowed us to have the time for deconstruction. Of course, as we know, one of the challenges is with the deconstruction is it takes longer. And if someone wants to get a project going and the building is going to be built where the existing is, it can be a challenge. But in this case, there was no excuse. And I said to city staff, this has got to be a priority, especially because this new building that we're building has all these green features from solar and various heating and energy and water capture and reuse metrics that we have to make sure that we include that in what we do with this existing building, that we be good stewards of those materials. That project was completed this summer. We also worked with Better Futures and they had a great crew of folks that were there for about 3.5 weeks, I believe it was. And you can see this beam here. Several of these, you may have noticed them in the building. These were these huge laminated beams that were part of the ceiling structure. Just amazing. And they salvaged all of those. As you can see, there were 10.6 tons of laminated beams salvaged, which just blows my mind. Each of those is probably well over 1,000 pounds or probably a ton on its own. So that was really fun. There was also a ton of beautiful, or 8.6 tons, excuse me, of beautiful knotty pine ceiling paneling. That was one of those things when I did a walkthrough, I said, just look at that ceiling. We cannot let that go to a landfill. It's just immaculate. And there was also kind of a surprise. There was this 2-inch insulation in the roof that even though it was 30 years old, it was still in fantastic condition. It had this rubber membrane over the top and it was really well taken care of essentially, or preserved. And it added some time, but they were able to take out all these really long, like 8-inch screws and salvage that insulation. I'm not sure what that will be used for. I know there are restrictions on how insulation can and can't be reused, but because it's a foam and not like a fiberglass, they were able to salvage that and capture that material. So the exciting thing with this project is that we actually captured 7.5% of the total. And as you can see, that's higher than that kind of average 5%. So that was really exciting. They recycled, again, a ton of concrete. Wall was concrete blocks. So there's not a whole lot that could have been done for reuse in that regard, but that was 77%. So total for this, we had 85% reuse and recycling, which is really amazing for what would be considered a commercial building, where sometimes it can be lower just because the amount of concrete and metal rebar and such that tends to be involved. So it was really exciting. A lot of great windows were taken out of there. There was also some material done as alternative daily cover, which for those of us in the waste world, it's kind of that it's beneficial reuse. It's not really recycling. It's a reuse, but not necessarily in the same way of reusing wood and materials for building new things or such like that. Really excited about this project and how it turned out. It was just such a great collaboration, and even though it was in the middle of the pandemic, they were an awesome team and did just a fantastic job. And as you saw, that space, that green area has already been reclaimed to green area, and they do plan on putting an open air pavilion there for continued use, which is great. Here's a few more pictures of that, their crews and those wonderful beams after everything else was taken out. So that was fun. Last couple minutes here, I want to talk about a program project event we did last year. Unfortunately, we did not do one this year for obvious reasons, but this was an event Kenneth came up with after attending the Build Reuse or the BMRA event conference in 2018, where they talked about having events for collecting building materials. And we do this for other things, you know, collecting mattress and trash and scrap metal that people need to get rid of. And we thought, what if we could preempt that and capture some of that material we know is ending up in the Packer trash truck, and instead capture that for some of our great reuse, building material reuse partners here in the Metro. We partnered with Better Features and Habitat Restore, and we also partnered with the county and some of our neighboring cities. I originally had approached Hennepin County about this event and said, hey, what do you think? Can we make this a countywide event like the Has Waste events and just invite everybody? And they were great in saying, for this first time, let's just start small, just in case, and just do St. Louis Park and maybe a couple others. So we reached out to our immediate cities around us, Edina, Hopkins, and Golden Valley, and asked them to participate. So the county helped us out by sending out some postcards to promote that. I believe it was about 10,000 postcards, which, as you can see at the bottom, was huge. About 40% of the people who came said they came because of that postcard. We had people do a little half sheet to tell us what they were bringing and why they came or how they knew about it. Most participants were from St. Louis Park and Edina. We did have some from Hopkins and Golden Valley. We did this as a 2-day event. We did it as a Friday kind of afternoon and a Saturday morning. Part of that was because as a city, we struggle sometimes with Saturday morning events. St. Louis Park has a larger Jewish population, so we want to be cognizant of those types of things when we plan events, that Saturdays aren't always super accessible. So if you ever think about these types of events, if you have a population that might be impacted in a way where they can't participate, keep that in mind. But this was really great. We had 2 hours each day, and we had a stream of cars most of the time. And it was something where we had those partners on site. Each were sort of assigned different materials that they would take. So one took flooring and windows and doors, and the other, was taking light fixtures and such. And we did that so we could kind of balance out who was vetting what materials based on the things that they are more likely to sell in their stores, but also so then they could really say, sorry, those cabinets are just, they're not in a shape we can use, we got to pass, or whatnot. And then we also had some of our recycling champion training volunteers help with things like light fixtures, where if we took ones that weren't so great, we could recycle them really easily in the scrap metal. But it was a fantastic event. We filled 4 large box trucks. We were not able to get weight metrics on this just because that's basically an impossible task with something like this, but fantastic event, and we really look forward to having those in the future. There's just a few pictures from that event, some of our volunteers. I know that says vote here. The other side had our materials, which you can see, like electrical lighting, so people knew where they needed to stop. And a few more pictures from that event. We did offer disposal at the end. It wasn't something we advertised, but if somebody showed up with, say, like a hollow corridor, which we very explicitly said they couldn't bring, but they did, they could have an opportunity to pay to dispose of that. We had very few people use that, but it was good for a few kind of just things that were unfortunately trash. Last little thing, just 2021 plans. Of course, so much depends on the pandemic, but we will continue to promote the county grant and deconstruction options, hoping for some potential additional city-owned houses being deconstructed. Actually, they're neighboring houses to that very first one I mentioned. Hopefully that is something we can do in 2021, and cross our fingers that we can do another collection event later in the year. And with that, this is my contact information. You're more than welcome to reach out to me with any questions. I'm happy to share more. Both those videos are on our city YouTube channel, and yeah, I'm available for any questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. I know you had those video links in your PowerPoint too, and we will be sharing that to everyone afterwards as well. That was really exciting. I love hearing the actual facts and numbers that are coming out of these projects, and how much of an impact, taking some extra time and care into deconstruction can really have on our waste stream. So thank you for sharing that information. And so, Erin, I think you're gonna wrap us up here with a few more things. And I think we've been doing a good job with following up on questions in the chat, but if there's any outstanding questions, feel free to throw those in the chat, or we'll probably have some time coming up here you can unmute yourself as well.
Okay, let me do my last share here. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of sum up one, why Rethos is involved in this work, and to give you some more resources for the kinds of programs and opportunities that we offer through our organization. You know, when Rethos was formed as the Preservation Alliance back in 1981, we were really formed for the purpose of preserving architecturally significant and historically significant places across the state. But that's really a very, very small subsection of our built environment, and about the, frankly, about a small subsection of the places that people truly care about and that add meaning and value to their communities. And so we've, over the last 10 plus years, probably really expanded our mission to incorporate much more than historically significant buildings, but also just talk about old buildings that we care about. And there's this adage in the preservation field and building reuse field about the greenest building is the one that's already built. And so we've developed some programs to try to really live that out in our work. This is just a screenshot of our webpage. So, you know, we rebranded ourselves as Rethos Places Reimagined in all of the ways that places can be reimagined. You know, part of it is obviously reusing those buildings and those places, but also it's recreating something else out of those materials if the need for it. And we also talk about the cultural history of a place and the cultural value of places as assets, and not necessarily only the built parts of it, but all of the memories and connections that people have with places, even if there is not like a clear standing structure for them to be connecting to. And then we have 4 program areas, essentially: our education program, our community engagement programs, our rural programs, and then I work primarily in the policy realm. So one of the classes that we have developed, and then we teach both through a certification program that we called Old Home Certified, which is a continuing education program for realtors. They can take a 2-day course and then get this Old Home certification, but then they can also take one-off shorter, like 1 or 2 or 3 hour CE credits over the course of the year when we offer that. And one of those classes is a class called Why Old is Green. It's part of that 2-day Old Home Certified course, but it's also offered occasionally in just as a standalone. And then it's something that we have been trying to make more available to our GreenStep cities. So for example, in this last year's GreenStep survey, we had asked if there were cities that wanted resources or an opportunity to host a homeowners workshop for, host a homeowners workshop for rehabilitation and maintenance techniques and things like that. And many cities actually expressed an interest in that, and so we followed up with that. Natalie Hennigan, our education coordinator, has made some connections in Northfield and in Egan. Jared from Egan actually had mentioned earlier in our breakout group that he had been at one of those things with Natalie. So I'm glad that GreenSteps are recognizing that that's an opportunity, and we really hope that we can strengthen that partnership as we move forward. But you know, green building essentially being the practice of creating structures and using processes that are environmentally responsible and resource efficient throughout a building's life cycle. So we're talking about, you know, all of the things that we've talked today, as well as its creation in the first place. And I think, you know, there's a tendency to think a green home has to be new, modern, or incorporate, you know, the latest in sustainable materials and the latest in new energy, you know, solutions and things like that. So yes, those are greenhouses, or they can be green buildings, but old buildings are green buildings too, partly because when they were built, they were a lot less energy intensive than modern buildings are anyway. And they were built, you know, they were sited in a way that allowed them to take advantage of natural breezes and natural lighting, and using all that old growth lumber that Emily had shown so clearly is really, really valuable and more sustainable. And that scales up, you know, to municipal buildings as well. This is a lead, and I took examples from outside of Minnesota because I didn't want to have to pit 2 Minnesota communities against each other. So this is not a Minnesota climate, obviously, but this is a LEED Gold certified building in Florida, about 46,000 square feet and built in 2009. But this building has that exact same LEED certification standard. It's about the same size. It's about 47,000 square feet. It's a reused historic school that's been used as the City of Baton Rouge's public works building. And they maintained 95% of the existing structure and envelope, including the flooring and the interior details and stuff. They did end up replacing the windows. Partly because those had been damaged and altered over the years. But you know, old buildings can be just as green as new buildings, and in some ways are probably greener. One of the things that we are working on the policy front is to extend our rehabilitation tax credit. That is really the best financial incentive that we have in Minnesota to allow cities and private developers. It has to be a private development, but to make sure that there are resources available to do larger scale building reuse and adaptation. So that is due to sunset in the end of June of 2021. And so we are forming a coalition to very robustly advocate for this in the next legislative session. But we also want to make sure that people have the resources and skills they need to do what is needed to the places that they care about. So this is a historic house in Mankato, Minnesota, that's being converted to a bed and breakfast, I believe. And so we had held an on-site workshop. This was obviously pre-COVID, to teach some of the maintenance and rehabilitation techniques that are needed in old buildings like this. And you know, here they are inside looking at the condition of the historic tin ceiling. There's a lot of woodwork and plaster repair that you can see is needed in this house to get it back to a state of usability. One of our most popular classes is historic window repair. So this is one of those ways that, you know, just on a very small scale, people can take a green step by rehabilitating and repurposing their historic windows and making sure that they function. We actually, in my household, just last weekend repaired the sash cords that had broken in the kitchen. It's been a project that is needed doing for 15 years, but it only took about 3 hours, and that was including like rounding all the materials up and clearing everything off the kitchen counter to do the repair and stuff like that. So it's doable, and we want to make sure that people have the resources and the know-how, and frankly are not intimidated by the prospect of doing that. So please reach out to us and let us know if these are you know, things that would be helpful in your communities. If we can figure out how to partner to make sure that these workshops and opportunities are available for your community members. As I said, I'm Erin, and with the GreenStep City Steering Committee, but Natalie, our education coordinator, is the one who is really a rock star in putting these rehab labs and community tours and all the other kinds of workshops that we have together. And we would love to continue working with our GreenStep partners. So that's all I have for that. Let me switch back to not sharing my screen. And then if there's any last minute Q&A, I think we can do that.
I am loving the chat going on over here. There's all kinds of studies and information being shared. I will try to pull some of that out of the chat and put that in our webinar workshop archive for you. So hopefully you don't have to copy everything right now. Any questions? Anyone want to unmute themselves? Any questions for our presenters or others?
I'm just always loving company in this work. I got woke in 2000 and been in panic mode ever since. So I run a company called Green Rock Apartments. We're green and we rock. We're Green Rock. But we're always seeking out ways to be greener, and I appreciate the wind in my sails this morning at this meeting. So, and I'm looking for ways to put wind in yours. So we will definitely be researching and looking at materials, alternative material supplies. And we also have 5 home projects over the next 3 years that we're doing that we're going to be building exclusively with all recycled material. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, keep us all in the loop as you do those, Dale, because I think, you know, one of the benefits of a webinar and stuff like this is that we learn from each other's examples so much. And things like, you know, we've talked a lot about how the logistical problems of sourcing reclaimed materials can really be a barrier, and knowing how people solve that problem would be just really a huge boost, I think.
Well, it is, and you nailed it in that it's in so much material selection, it's expediency and time and demand of the customer to get it done. So most of what we do is apartment turns, and you know, we buy old buildings. I've got buildings from 1883 through the year 2001 that I purchased and renovated or greened up. We're gonna hit 205,000 watts of solar on our rooftops next spring. So we'll have zero energy on 6 commercial buildings over 8 months. So we're going after it. Every dime I have is going towards sustainability. So, and more. Ask my wife.
Very cool. Yes, I've seen some photos of some of your projects. I probably driven by some too. So I'm really excited to hear that you're still working in on green buildings and old buildings and
oh yeah.
everything in
We
between.
have, if you Google Green Rock Apartments and you look at the business listing, there's a canary yellow house with a white metal roof and 14,000 watts of solar that's on the front. It's gorgeous. And that house was built in 1901. And so, yeah, I've owned that house for 20 years and we keep beating on that thing and trying to get it as green as possible, but we're near zero energy on that house.
Very cool. Can be done. Any other comments, questions out there? I'll share once again the main best practice action that you'll find for GreenStep cities around construction, demolition, ordinances, permitting, and policies is under best practice action 22.8. And so I will put that in the chat again. You'll find some resources and examples out there, but it sounds like there's some new things that I want to pull from this workshop that we can add into that implementation tools tab as well. And Erin, do you have any other last words?
No, other than thank you so much to all of our presenters and for all of the attendees. I thought this was a really fantastic webinar, and I too am motivated, and I learned a ton just helping to pull it together. So thank you all for all of your work on this and for doing the essential daily work that needs to happen to move this forward.
Well, just a last thing on mine, there's on Minnesota Renewable Energy Society in November. If you go to their website, mnrenewables.org, I was the featured speaker, and I've got an hour presentation on our business model of doing a green rental property company. And we incorporate a lot of what you're talking about. There's always more to do, but we do things like offer the tenants garden space, a free 100% recycled toilet paper. I could go on, but it's got it all in the presentation. So if anybody wants to take a look at that, it's mnrenewables.org, and that would be, you scroll down and you look under featured speakers, but it's I present our green model, and you've helped me get even greener this morning. So I'm going to put more emphasis on used materials. We do it anyway, but we're gonna bump it up a notch. I need to up my game.
I'm glad we could inspire you, Dale. Just before we wrap up here, I will also put in the link for our upcoming workshops. We are actually taking January off for our traditional monthly workshop series. We might reach out to GreenStep communities for some other engagement opportunities that we're working on at the state. But otherwise, our next workshop is February 17th about, we'll be working and talking about understanding and maintaining soil health. In fact, all three of ours workshops in the spring are more on the biological soil, tree, and pollinator side of things. So hopefully we'll have a nice spring to look forward to after a long winter. And so with that, I think we are set to go. I will follow up with all of you in the coming week with the webinar recording, PowerPoint slides, and some links and contact information as well. So please do use that as an opportunity to connect with our speakers and others on this topic. And thank you to all of our presenters today. And Erin, thank you so much for coordinating the agenda and also suggesting this topic. I had a lot of fun and learned a lot today.
Thanks again for the invitation. It was fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.